Hey, I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about your first exam. Make sure you have the right expectation for how things are going to be laid out. Um, First, let me talk a little bit about my philosophy about writing exams. Uh, I don't go into an exam with a curve planned or with the expectation that I'm going to curve anything. I believe that a C student should be able to get a C on the exam. A B student should be able to get a B. A student should get an A, and that means 90% above is an A student, 80 to 90 is a B student, 70 to 80 is a C student. So with that in mind, I try to write the exam so a C student should be able to get about 75%. So 3/4 of the exam are designed for C students. All of the basics, nothing particularly challenging, nothing you haven't seen before. Definitely just a solid exam. You definitely need to know all the basics to get a C, but nothing really advanced or you have seen everything before. Then there are always going to be a couple more challenging questions. Tell me who the B students are. And for me, to get an A in my class, it isn't just enough to know the basics. You have to be able to take everything you've learned and apply it to something new. And so there will be one or two questions, about 10 points worth that to me are the A questions that say, okay, here's something new that you can take the material you've learned so far and apply it and really show me that you are an advanced student. So that's a little bit about my philosophy for writing exams. So let's go next and talk a little bit about what to expect in terms of topics that you'll be asked about.
Okay, so right now I am in the Exam 1 review document, which you can find linked from the homepage, a news post, or from the Week 4 outline. There are three main sections here. You've got the suggested study guide, which I'll talk very briefly about, the topic summary, which we'll spend some more time talking about, then at the end there are some frequently asked questions about exams. So the suggested study guide, first you want to watch this whole video, which the Exam 1 review YouTube video, you can download it if you'd prefer in a QuickTime or iPod format. You should spend a couple of hours going through the topic summary below. You should watch the exam mechanics YouTube video, which shows you how the exam will work. Every semester there are a couple people who say, well, you didn't tell me we were going to need to use the technology or this or that, but every semester that exam is always linked, so you have no excuse for not knowing how the exam is going to work in the testing center, so you need to watch that video. Then finally is a practice exam, which actually is a little bit longer than a regular exam. It has some extra stuff, which is good because there's extra things to prepare you there, but you can get that if you watch the exam mechanics video, this will make more sense, but there's a printed portion and a technology portion, and don't forget to check that with the solution. That should take you a couple hours. Then after that, you'll kind of know where your weaknesses are. So spend some time going through the online lessons again. If you like, you can do the My Math Lab chapter tests. Do not start there and focus on those. My questions will be worded differently. They'll be more like the questions in the online lessons and in the practice exam. But this can be a way to look at some of the areas that you're weakest on. Then you can spend some time reviewing technology skills. So let's go through the topic summary and talk about types of questions. First of all, you might be asked some questions about what type of variable, how to classify a particular type of variable. And there are two main classifications: is it qualitative or quantitative, and is it discrete or continuous? You'll notice that these are links, and they link back to the online lessons for those particular sections. Second, it's important that you understand the difference between a designed experiment and an observational study, and most importantly, the consequences of that difference. By that I mean, if it's an observational study, you cannot claim that one thing causes another, but if it's a designed experiment, you can. We might have some questions about types of observational studies, so take a look at those links. There will definitely be some question or a question about a type of designed experiment, and there's those components. Typically what I do is I give you a description of an experiment and ask you to list each of these three or give an example of each of these three, things like that. For terms, I don't ask for definitions or matching or anything like that, but I may ask you, okay, in this context, what is the population versus what is the sample? I may say create a histogram with a class width of 10. Well, you need to know what that means. Lower and upper limits, upper limit of the class, lower limit of the class. What's the difference between a parameter and a statistic? The types of sampling. Often I'll give an example of a sampling strategy and ask which type it is. So you need to be able to identify those. I really encourage you to look over particularly stratified and cluster. Most people, if they're going to struggle, they struggle with those two. For how to obtain a random sample using technology, the only thing I can really do here is ask you to describe to me how you would do it, because I don't know how I could know whether a particular sample is random. Actually, there are ways, but it's nothing I'm going to do. So I might ask you to describe how to find a random sample. All of these charts you do need to know how to make using technology or by hand. The frequency, sorry, let me clarify that. The frequency and relative frequency tables, those you could do by hand. The stem and leaf plot, you can't use technology for that. The tables here, but the bar graph, Pareto chart, pie chart, histograms especially, people really struggle with histograms, so make sure you know how to do histograms. And the time graphs. Later, there's a box plot. All of those are charts you need to know how to use using technology. So spend some time with those, make sure you know how to do that. You'll have time on your own, but you need to know how to do those. You'll have a limited time to do them. There might be some questions about the distribution shape, either from a description, maybe from a histogram or a box plot. Measures of center, you're going to need to know how to find these using technology, and you need to know which one would be best given a particular situation. So like if you have quantitative data and it's fairly symmetric, it's not skewed, then the mean would be best. If it's skewed, you'd want to use median because it's resistant to outliers. And if you have qualitative data, that's when you use the mode. For the measures of dispersion, you want to know the range, standard deviation, variance. Make sure you know all of those and how to calculate them. The empirical rule, make sure you know what that means and how to use it. From group data, the formula will be given for how to find the weighted mean, but you need to know how to calculate it and how to use the formula. Measures of position, none of these formulas will be given here. So for example, a z-score, you have to know how to find the z-score. You need to know what it means. For example, you see one of these in the practice exam, but you usually use the z-score when you want to know, we want to compare two values relative to each other when they're from different populations. You'll see an example of that in the practice exam. Percentiles, you need to know how to find them. Quartiles, interquartile range, and outliers. I sometimes ask a question about the fences and outliers, and there's always a group of people who are not prepared for that, so be sure you know how to find those fences, not just how to use the software and have it graph it for you. Make sure you actually know how to calculate the fences. And then I've got to mention here again box plots. You need to know how to create these using technology. That means when I say using technology, when you're in the testing center, you have two options: Excel 2007 and StatCrunch. That's it. You have to know how to create those graphs using one of those two technologies. That's been emphasized all semester within D2L and in the online lessons. So I think those are the main points. There are some frequently asked questions down here in the bottom that you're welcome to look over. If you have any particular questions about whether something will be on the exam, feel free to make a post in D2L so that everybody can see your question and I can answer every one. You can always send me an email too. But I can't overemphasize how important it is to prepare for this, in particular to not depend on the My Math Lab homework questions. Those are good, that's part of your homework, it's part of your grade, but you need to look at, in particular, while you're watching this. So this video, look through the topic summaries below, watch the exam mechanics video so you know how the exam will work, and try the practice exam. You need to know how I'm going to word my questions. So be sure you try that and check your answers with the solutions.